Thank you all very much, and thank you to BBC Embrace for inviting me to participate this evening. And it's a huge, huge pleasure to be here, and I'm so looking forward to hearing the other speakers. Following the tradition of previous Mandela lectures, we have been asked to address the following quotation from President Mandela. But I want to add to the quotation because there's something that comes first that I think is really important. He said, "Often, in addressing younger people, I make the point that what counts in life is not the mere fact that we have lived, it is what difference we have made to the lives of others that will determine the significance of the life we lead." Profound and thought-provoking words, which, as Brenda said, were made in a speech on the occasion of Walter Sisulu's 90th birthday in May 2002. Walter Sisulu was, of course, one of the giants of the ANC, becoming Secretary General in 1949, and he was jailed in Robben Island for 26 years. President Mandela used that quotation to frame his remarks about Walter Sisulu, remarks which were about Walter Sisulu's leadership and contribution to the ANC. He described him as selfless and wise, someone who was a unifier, not divider, who was able to heal, believed in collective leadership, in sharing insights, and in listening and learning. Words, actually, that could describe President Mandela himself. This evening, what I would like to do is to borrow President Mandela's framing and use it to discuss leadership. Because I feel very strongly that whilst we're at a particularly difficult phase, and I hope it's a phase, in our national and global political life, it's also an opportunity for all of us to show the leadership which is so lacking at the highest levels of our country. What needs to be done? I'm not sure how historians will judge this moment in our history, but living through it, I've been struck by the following. In Britain, the outcome of the referendum on Britain's membership of the European Union showed us a deeply divided country. Yes, we had the highest turnout ever, but a 52-48 outcome is not a ringing endorsement for one or other course of action. The leadership that followed did not help to unite us, did not seek to tackle the root causes of the divisions in our country. Inequality and lack of access in many parts of the country to adequate services, to housing, to education, to healthcare. A lack of jobs, a growing divide between rich and poor and between different parts of the country. A perception of the failure of politicians to understand and tackle everyday challenges. And a retreat from the rest of the world, with problems growing and an inattention, as people saw it, to problems at home. People are concerned about the impact of immigration and refugee flows, the impact of that on community cohesion, on job security, on access to work and services. People looked at migrant communities and looked at the diversity in their communities, and straight after that referendum, we saw a rise in racist attacks. And yet, politically, did we see our leadership come anywhere close to tackling it? We saw people at the local level having to deal with it, but not at the national level. We saw people grappling to understand the reality of growing more interconnected across the world, but we also saw increasing fragmentation. Contradictions are rife. What is happening in Britain is reflected elsewhere. Over the last few years, we've all felt the impact of the volatility and uncertainty in a world which is seeing major shifts in power relationships between nations, where liberal democracy is under severe pressure, and where people have become angry and fearful about what the future holds. We're facing an unprecedented set of global challenges, threats and unresolved crises that we're trying to make sense of. Civil wars, insurgencies, poverty, inequality, migration, extremism, environmental degradation, the impact of climate change, the list goes on. Huge threats to our civil liberties and human rights, and rapid technological developments which can bring opportunities but also bring challenges. I don't think that we can solve any of these problems working in isolation. I believe in the value of global community and in our common humanity. And I've seen it in action, very much in the way that President Mandela talks about in that quote. When I was at the United Nations, I saw some of the poorest people in the world, people with nothing, people who had to move as a result of conflict, sometimes a conflict meted on them by their own governments, people supporting and helping each other, women coming together because they were so afraid for their children, for their sons who were being drafted into armies or into groups to fight, for their daughters who were facing sexual violence and rape. These were women and communities who were having to come together and show leadership in the face of some significant challenges. I've seen at my own university students supporting refugee communities every single day, going out there and working with people who were being challenged. I've seen NGOs and civil society organizations being led by individuals in their communities trying to make a difference every single day. Now, I'm not starry-eyed about this. I know that there are deep divisions and differences between us, misunderstandings, hatreds even. I've seen the impact of racism and other forms of prejudice and discrimination, and the impact it has on our everyday lives. My experience of migration from Guyana to Britain as a child, I think, has helped with my worldview. It's played a key role in making me feel that I have to be outward-facing. I have to have a global perspective. And my parents were very important in helping me to think about that, to see the world from a range of different perspectives. And that's why I have watched with increasing concern the way that political populists have sold the public simplistic answers to complex problems. The scapegoating of migrants and refugees, of settled communities, of minorities and whole religions who have been vilified. A young woman, British, who left this country when she was 15, stripped of her nationality because her parents came from another country, a country that she had never even been to. Now, I am not saying that there aren't things that that young woman has to answer for, but I do ask myself, if that was someone who was white with a British and second nationality, would they have faced the same experience? I've seen facts twisted or denied for short-term political gain. Fake news and post-truth have become key words in our lexicon. And whilst we have a media which in some parts of the world have become more and more cowed, we have also seen some significant leadership shown by journalists around the world, drawing attention to inequality, to the way that human rights have been abused around the world, acting as human rights defenders. There are no simple examples or explanations for the political events which have occurred in the last few years, not just in Britain, but in other parts of the world, in other parts of Europe, Italy, Hungary, Austria. going further afield, the United States, the Philippines, Brazil. But there are common themes, I think, that run across them all, that across the political, social, class, and race spectrum, citizens have lost faith. They've lost trust. They've lost belief in their democratic institutions and in their representatives. Part of that, of course, has had to do with what happened in 2008 with the global financial crisis. It's had to do with the imposition of austerity. What has happened to people who have lost their jobs, their homes, where industries have been decimated, communities devastated, relationships changed forever. I think that across many countries in the world, people have been looking for a new leadership, a leadership that's brave, bold, with leaders who understand people's day-to-day lives, their struggles, their fears, and understand the way that local and national identities have been challenged by the social and economic changes we are seeing. Because politics is ultimately about each and every one of us. It's about individuals. You can't take the public for granted. People have had to help themselves. They've had to show their own leadership in these situations as they have evolved. Our Prime Minister said a couple of years ago, if you believe you're a citizen of the world, you're a citizen of nowhere. You don't understand what citizenship means. I don't agree with that. I think it's insular. We all inhabit many different identities. I see myself as British, as Guyanese, the place where I was born, as African, because that's where my roots are, someone with a global outlook. For our country to be successful, inclusion, acceptance of diversity, and a commitment to equality is crucial. We need a leadership that helps us to understand what's happening in the world. It's a job of our leaders to help citizens to understand and grapple with the complex problems which face us. I don't think we can afford to look inward. The scale of the challenges we face nationally and internationally demand that we look outward. As Nelson Mandela said, we need a selfless leadership. We need wisdom. We need a sense of collective responsibility. We need vision. And crucially, we need our young people to lead. It's their future that they're fighting for. Working as I do in a university, I see sustained interest and engagement from young people every day. They care about the state of the world. They have a strong belief that it can be better and it can be different. SOAS students come from over 130 countries. They have robust conversations. They have different histories. They have different perspectives. They debate and argue. They learn from each other. But they are unflinching in their quest for equality and justice. Even without the leadership at national level that we need, we can make a difference. We can change things because we can do that at a local level. Leadership comes at every level of our society. And that's what I think Nelson Mandela was talking about when he said, what counts in life is not the mere fact that we have lived, but essentially the significance of the life that we lead, being based on the difference that we have made in the lives of others. Thank you very much.